So everyone, I'm so glad to get to be here with you guys this morning. My name is Colleen McKay. So I am a master practitioner in neurolinguistic programming. That's why I'm actually here to talk with you guys today. And what that really means is that I am basically a specialist in communication. I fell into that career role because when I started off in finance, I was working as a stockbroker, and as a stockbroker, I was often working with a lot of people who were much older than I was, as well as people who were very seasoned in the industry. And to give you a little context, I was only 21 when I became a stockbroker. So I very quickly realized that I was going to need to improve my own communication skills because realistically, and I look back at this now, who's going to look at a 21-year-old and say, yeah, here's a couple $1 million for you to use for my portfolio to trade. I'm completely comfortable with it, right? So with that, I realized, okay, I'm going to need to change things up a little bit, and I'm going to need to give myself an edge. And that's how I started getting involved with neurolinguistic programming. It started off that I was taking courses after courses just to improve myself. And then I took this one course that was an introductory course. It was a basic practitioner level of neurolinguistic programming. And from there, I got hooked. Neurolinguistic programming has become the backbone of pretty much everything I do personally and professionally. When I started taking it, like I said, it was for personal reasons to improve myself for professional reasons. But a number of things kind of happen. You know, life gets really messy and things happen throughout your lifespan that can really kick you off your regular path. And what NLP did was it really helped me get centered back on the path, become mentally resilient, and be able to learn to utilize the tools I had around me to better myself and my business. So that is how I got involved in NLP. Now I'm trying to do the presentation mode on here. I apologize. There's usually a tab that lets me just do it because I'd like to be able to go through this in presentation mode. If you can bear with me just a few more seconds. Does anyone know how to use the presentation mode in Adobe?
Unfortunately, I do not.
Okay, that's completely okay. I'm looking for the view screen. Hang on one second. I'm going to do a different share. I'm going to actually share it from the PowerPoint instead, because I think that that will probably make things a little bit easier. Let's do. There we go. Now we can do this in presentation mode. Now it's telling me that I have low video quality. Is everybody able to see this okay?
Yeah. We can see you perfect and hear you perfect.
Okay, brilliant. So as I went through my little bio already, I have helped clients. I've helped clients all the way from brand new real estate agents making zero money to seasoned ones that were having trouble transitioning. My clients on average are making between $100,000 to $400,000. It really does average on how into the business they are, but there's been a lot of success behind the methods that we do because I believe strongly that as a coach, for you to be successful, for my clients to be successful, you have to be aligned internally to be successful externally. So oftentimes when I'm working with clients, we begin working from a business standpoint. Maybe they want to learn how to incorporate NLP to communicate more effectively, which is what we're going to talk about today. And it almost always ends up being something along the lines where we're working on a personal level as well. And that's because as I grew through my own journey, I realized how important it was. If I wasn't thriving personally and doing well personally, then it was always affecting my work mentality. So it's like waking up in the morning, you've had a rough night the night before, and you try to go to work and be on your A game. It's hard. So I really learned how to incorporate that and help my clients incorporate that as well. Now, here you're going to see some of the things that you guys are already encountering from hurdles in situations, but I don't think I really need to go over that. You know what your issues are. But the main one that I wanted to talk about was communication today. Now, why isn't it letting me go to my next screen? Sorry. There we go. Now, the reason why communication is so important in today's age is because we are being bombarded. As you guys all know, the train for social media and online presence is the way that many people are generating leads these days and networking as a mass. And there's so many benefits as to why it's a 24-hour system. You are working even when you're sleeping, kind of thing. So it's really beneficial. But the problem with everything being so heavy with social media is that we are losing the foundation of communication, being able to communicate one-on-one with individuals, because we're so used to doing it to a mass audience and not having them communicating directly back with us in real time. So because of that, communication and being a good communicator is what will really set you apart from your competition. The other day, I was talking with an old client of mine, and I've been working with her from a financial perspective for, I want to say, about 9 years. And we were chatting. She actually didn't know that I was a master practitioner in neurolinguistic programming. She didn't know any of my coaching side. And she happened to fall upon me on the internet, and she was asking me about it. And we were talking about it. She said, it's really funny because now understanding your education, I know why I was so attracted to working with you. We dove deeper into the conversation. She was talking about how she always thought that I was a really strong communicator. I was always able to make her feel comfortable, make her feel heard, as well as answer questions for her and predict questions that she had coming up. Now, that wasn't because I was so knowledgeable. I am knowledgeable, but it was because I was able to recognize what type of representational system that she was working in, and then I adapted and I adopted it. So, right here, we're talking about NLP representational system. So some of you guys may already be familiar with it, but for those who are not, your representational system is visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. There's two supplementary ones, which are olfactory and gustatory. Olfactory has to do with smell, so I always think the smell of an olfactory, and gustatory, taste, which I always think of like a gusto restaurant, or I think of a gush of taste. So we've got the three primary ones: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And those are how the majority of our population communicates. Now, most people are going to be visual or auditory people, but there's also still a lot of kinesthetic people. Now, when you recognize the preference of the person that you are speaking with, and you are able to get into their representational system, meaning that you're able to communicate, let's say they're visually, you're able to communicate from a visual standpoint, it creates a rapport that is so deep that that trust factor immediately becomes part of the equation. And you guys know that one of the reasons why people work with you guys as real estate agents is the trust factor. Trust that you're going to take care of them, trust that they understand what you're saying, trust that you're going to find the right home for them or sell their home for them. So when you're able to recognize what type of different representational system they're functioning from, you're also then able to recognize the language patterns that they're using, and then reframe them to use them in your standpoint. So when you're able to use language patterns, they actually put people into a trance or a hypnotic like state. So many of you guys, being road warriors, you drive. And when you drive, you probably get into your vehicle and you drive for a certain period of time and you arrive at your destination and you don't remember part of that drive. And that's because you go into a trance-like state. Now, what's really interesting about trance states is that we are most vulnerable, our unconscious mind is most vulnerable and open to suggestion when we're in a trance state. Now, when you recognize somebody's representational system and you use their language patterns, what it automatically does is it lulls them into a trance state because they trust you. So with them being lulled into that trance state, you're then able to give them suggestions, guide them in the direction that you want them to go. And you can do those things with embedded commands, which I will teach you one day, and they're very powerful. So let's start talking about why and how you can use the representational systems and adopting them into recognizing how your clients are using them. First and foremost, networking and lead generation. You guys are networking online, of course, which is the next one. But when you're doing it in person, when you're able to automatically be able to recognize that person's representational system, you're going to connect with them and create that rapport very quickly, which creates that knowingness, which then will help them more towards wanting to work with you as well as refer people to you. So when you're at networking events, you can become the star by becoming that personable person, making people feel more comfortable. One of the biggest lessons that I think that I could teach anybody is people don't remember all of the words that you use. What they remember is how you make them feel. So by using this, so when you're networking and lead generating, you're going to make them get the warm and fuzzies about you. The next one is social media mastery. So like I touched upon when we first started, it is a world of social media now. If you are not online now with your business, you are falling behind. So I definitely encourage you, if you are not putting a lot of, or putting some effort at least into your social media and generating leads from there, you need to start right now. Now, a way that you can set yourself apart from your competition, other than creating great content, is using VACOG to connect stronger with your potential target audience, setting yourself apart by using the VACOG to light up everybody's communication system. Now with video is really great. There's a reason why it trends so well, is because it does light up your entire audio, visual, and kinesthetic system. You're able to create the brand feels, you're able to communicate verbally, and you're also able to create nice visuals. It really lights it all up. But when you're doing stagnant posts, when you're doing just a stationary post, this is when you really want to tailor your copy. And by tailoring your copy to utilize VACOG in it will help set you apart. So what I mean by this, if you're not using AI yet, definitely are encouraging you to do that. It is a game-changing thing. When you're using your AI and you're giving it the prompt, very simply, all you need to do is incorporate a prompt to encourage use of VACOG in there as well. So what I mean is, let's say that I'm creating a post and I want to get the copy for the post. And let's say the post is about the state of the home market next week, because I'm pre-planning. So when I'm doing that, I'm going to give a prompt into my AI saying, please incorporate visual, auditory, and kinesthetic language to connect on a deeper level with my target audience. By just including that alone, it will make the copy that much more enchanting to your target audience, which will then make them want to look at your content above others' content. So that's how you can use it with social media. And then my next one is listing and buying presentations. So this is where it becomes really important, again, for you to set yourself apart from others. The language that you use and making it like telling a story is what gets people interested in reading. And once they're interested in reading about it, then they're interested in seeing it as well. So when you are doing this with, say, a listing presentation, you connect on a deeper level with your potential clients. When you're doing it with a actual listing, the description of a listing, you're able to create the story for someone to actually feel like they are presently in the home, touring it and visualizing. So you're able to, again, light up that entire VACOG. So let's get into how to recognize these representational systems, because oftentimes when we talk about it, it's one thing to say, there's people who are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, but it's another thing to be able to recognize what they are. Now, please don't worry. I am going to be sending this over to SG at the end so that you guys will have this, because I think it's a really great tool. And one of the things with NLP is the more that you work on it, the more that it becomes natural for you, the more that it becomes natural for you, the more that you're going to use it. The more you use it, the more that you're going to see your target audience responding positively to it. So, visual characteristics. People who are visual tend to use visual language. They pay a lot of attention to detail. So they're going to be the people who will notice scuffs on the wall. They love to imagine. So I tend to be a highly visual person too, and I love to imagine things in my mind. I can't tell you how many times I have redecorated my home while lying in bed. They also like to organize spaces. So they are attracted to organized spaces as well as they like to have organized spaces. They also have a preference for visual aids. So when you're doing a buyer or listing presentation, showing them things like charts, showing them things factual visually, that's going to resonate on a deeper level with them. Also, they have strong spatial awareness. So they would be somebody who would be able to tell you, oh, this is about 10 feet long, or this is about 7 inches long. They're able to kind of understand visually their space in a metrical way. Also, they tend to like creative and design. So they'll be somebody who has an appreciation for art. They'll be somebody who likes architectural details. And also very strong visual memory. They might be terrible with names, but they might be very strong at remembering how to get somewhere by just driving that path again. Now, words that you want to look out for in recognizing a visual person are things like picturesque, bright, aesthetic, visualize, clarity, stylish, panoramic, artistic, detailed. And there's a number of other ones that you can see here. You're going to also be looking for phrases that they might use, such as, I'm drawn to properties with a picturesque view, like opening, or I like that one listing. The aesthetic appeal of a home is crucial to me. I appreciate stylish interiors. I can't visualize my future or my furniture fitting. Sorry, it was meant to say, yes, furniture. I can't visualize my furniture fitting into the layout of this house. The layout and architectural details of this property stand out. I love to imagine summer evenings looking out the window of the living room. These are all kind of things. Now, obviously, if you're working with different ages, they might say things in a little bit of a different way. But these are types of phrases that you're going to want to be listening for. And that's how you, number one, recognize what a visual person is. Now, other ways is you're going to listen for the frequent use of the terms like see, show, or picture. And they might say things like, I envision a bright living room, when you're asking them what type of home they're looking for. You also want to observe the client's comments and what they appreciate for the specific architectural details of the properties when you're viewing them. You're also going to want to notice their interest in the property. So are they looking more towards the pictures or the visual tours, or do they just want to go to the house? They're not really caring about seeing the things in advance. Next, they're probably going to inquire about the preferences of the home's organization. So they might want to know, does this home have a dedicated laundry space? Do they have enough storage space? They're going to want to know about the organizational details. And say it's a home that doesn't have organizational details, they're going to be caught up on that. So you'll be able to kind of recognize that, and that's a cue that they're visual. You want to listen for their ability to describe how they would arrange furniture or decorate the space based on the mental images. So again, when they're talking, let's say that it's a first-time home buyer, obviously they're not going to get their, well, probably not going to get their dream home their first go. But if they are able to describe how they would like to transform the home into their dream home, they're likely visual. Now, if they're not a visual person, then they're going to be leaning on you to help them visualize that. So that's also a cue. If they're really struggling to visualize something, then you can help guide them with that. You're going to gauge their response with visual aids like the floor plans and the property presentations. And they may engage more positively when it comes to seeing those floor plans. If you describe to them, oh, this is a 3-bedroom home with with 4 bathrooms kind of scenario, and they're like, I don't really know. But then you show them the floor plan, also a cue that they're likely visual. They also like to observe their comfort, or you should also observe their comfort and ease in navigating through different areas of the property tour. And this can also help you recognize when they have that spatial awareness. So for example, if they're really noticing that the hallway seems really narrow, then it's probably a spatial awareness thing, which is an indicator that they're visual as well. Now, they're going to probably inquire about different things that have to do with the color of the home, the property details and how they combine together, the curb appeal of it. Those are all things that are going to highlight that they're a visual person. Now, to connect with a visual person on a deeper level, this is where you then want to get into their representational system and put it back to them. So when I was saying how you recognize it, once you're recognizing it, you then want to use their language patterns. You want to use their visual descriptions to put it back to them to help them feel more comfortable. So one of the things I love is visual storytelling. This is where you're going to share the visually compelling stories about properties. You're going to highlight the unique features and the design elements, and you're going to use imagery and descriptive language to evoke the vivid mental pictures. So what I mean by that is, if I was at a presentation and I was asking a client what they would like to see in their home, I would have them describe to me what, their checklist is. And then I would describe back their checklist as if I'm giving them a movie. So I'd be like, I absolutely understand. When I think about what you're telling me and what you want a property, I imagine myself driving down that street into the subdivision. And as I'm driving down, I can see all the kids playing around me. I pull into my 4-car driveway and I can see the lights glowing from my home because it's dusk. I get out and I walk to my porch. That's like the porch where that's a wraparound porch. I walk up to my wraparound porch and I walk in to my inviting front entranceway that is brightly lit, and so on. So see how I'm now taking you through a story? You take everything that they've said, you feed it back to them, and you create a story for them as well. Personalized visual presentations. So you can tailor your presentations to include more visually appealing material. You obviously want to include high quality photographs because that's a must, but also including things like visual tour and the floor plans when you know what your client is potentially interested in. So let's say that you have a couple of properties that you want to present to them, and doing that hands-on approach, you want to present to them and you want to do it maybe 3 at a time. I would actually create a presentation where I could show them the details of these properties and get them engaged so that when they go to the properties, they're excited. Next one is architectural insight. So when you're at the properties, you want to provide detailed insight into the architectural aspects of the home. You're going to visualize, or you're going to emphasize the visual elements. You're going to discuss the certain design, and you're going to actually dive into the details of how it enhances the home. So for example, let's say that they have the kitchen was just recently redone and it's the farmhouse trend. You're going to be mentioning how that farmhouse trend, being so sought after right now, is one that is bright and inviting and comforting. I'm going to create that story for them again. Collaborative vision boarding. So this is another thing. When you have clients that are struggling to be able to tell you what they want, sometimes getting them to actually do a vision board can be very helpful as well. Not that you're going to find everything on their vision board, but that you are able to then take what's on their vision board and feed it back to them when they're doing the home tours. So let's say that it's somebody who likes a modern look and you're going into, and again, let's say that maybe they're not a first time home buyer, maybe it's their second home, but again, not their dream home, but a home that is good, has good bones, and can be modified to fit into their aesthetic. By taking them through and knowing what's on their vision board, you're able to then describe that room as if it had been transformed into what they have on their vision board. So collaborating with them to create the vision board. You can do those online as well. There's really great tools, but these are ways that you can really set yourself apart as a real estate agent when you have a visual client. Now, next is auditory. So, auditory individuals are ones who communicate more strongly and receive information through auditory, which is listening. So, they're people who tend to have strong verbal communication skills. They're very attuned and sensitive to sound. They have an interest in verbal descriptions. They have narrative thinking. So, I always think of Morgan Freeman whenever I'm working with an auditory person, and I think of myself describing situations as he might. They also have a preference for verbal instructions. So drawing things out for them is not how it's going to do. When you're describing to them the home buying process, speaking it to them is going to be what will resonate. Next is the engagement with audio media. So they're going to be people who will probably, when they're seeing a presentation, they might turn their head and just listen. Always look for someone who turns their right ear to you, because it means that they're trying to understand, but they're likely auditory as well. So if you notice that the client you're talking with is constantly turning to the right, that means that they're auditory. Also have an emphasis on sound quality. So these are people who are going to, if you speak low, they're going to ask you to speak up. If you don't pronunciate your words, they're going to ask you to repeat things, because that quality is important to them. Interest in language and linguistics. So they are people who might have an interest in learning multiple languages as well. And they have a very strong auditory memory, meaning that if you say something to them, they're probably going to be remembering it. So there'll be people who are really good with names because they're spoken to them. Words that you're going to want to listen for with auditory people is harmonious, sound, hear, echo, melodic, resonate, rhythm, pitch, cadence, vocalize. These are words that they tend to incorporate because they have a very strong auditory background in them. Now, phrases that you might hear them say is, I appreciate the atmosphere of the neighborhood. The sound of kids playing outside resonates with me. The rhythm of the city appeals to me. I enjoy the lively melodic atmosphere or ambiance. And can you clarify the acoustics in this home, or how the acoustics are in this home? I prefer spaces that are sonorous and well balanced. The cadence of the surrounding nature is essential to me. I'm drawn to homes with a soothing, reverberating environment. I love when a home has a vocal character. It adds an eloquent touch to the overall atmosphere. Now, ways that you can recognize an auditory person. Visual or individuals with a primary auditory representational system tend to use language that is dominated by auditory terms and expressions. They're very sensitive to sounds in their environment, and they probably will notice a lot of background noise or changes in the auditory stimuli. So, for example, I often do my meetings when I am doing visual auditory meetings like this, so on Zoom and on Google. And one of the biggest things is I like to have a silent atmosphere. As you now probably see, I'm completely silent. My kids are at the door. Prior to that, though, when they were here, I was concerned because anybody who might be auditory on this call was very likely distracted, even though they were in a different room, by their sounds in the background. So anyone that's auditory, they're going to be highly distracted by background noises. So going somewhere that is loud, such as a Starbucks, might actually be very difficult for them to concentrate because they're being distracted by all of the other noises taking place. So just a little tip there. Now, they're going to prefer detail with verbal descriptions and explanations when learning and understanding information. So, again, taking them through processes verbally and explaining it in detail helps resonate on a deep level. They also think in terms of narratives. So they will recall information through stories and verbal sequences better. So, the reason why we tell stories in general is because people tend to remember the essence of a story versus the specific words that are used. Same with an auditory person, but they're also going to remember the words that are being used a little bit more than the average individual. When you tell them a story, they will remember that story long term. So it's really fun when you can incorporate stories into the buying or selling transaction with when you're pitching to them with a buyer or seller in how you've been successful with other clients. They often communicate with clarity, articulation, and they're very strong with being able to describe their thoughts. So it will be somebody who can describe to you what they want to hear and how they want to be communicated with. So, an auditory person, when you're first talking to them, they're probably going to guide you in how you should communicate with them. So, you might hear someone say, I'm very sensitive to the way that someone speaks to me. They're oftentimes very forward like that. Um, and they also have a strong auditory memory, so recalling spoken information easily. Now, how to connect with an auditory person on a deeper level. You want to emphasize clear and articulate verbal communication during all of your interactions. You're going to have well-crafted verbal descriptions and engage in meaningful conversations. That's another thing too. Auditory people, they're going to want to have more meaningful conversations because they're paying such attention to the words. So they'll remember what you said. So make sure in all situations if you don't know the answer to something, use these words. You know what? I want to be certain with the information that I give to you. So give me an hour or give me 24 hours. I'm going to gather and confirm the details, and then I'll get back to you. Really important because with an auditory person, they're going to hear it. And if you say something that wasn't true or you say something that has a discrepancy from what you're now saying, they're going to catch it and they're going to call you on it. Now, as I mentioned, auditory book style. So you want to provide detailed property descriptions using rich narrative language. So crafting virtual or in-person tours as a narration like it's an audiobook. So you could literally, as you're watching the tour with them, be describing the room and going through and describing the way that they could be living their life through that. Look at the way that this picturesque window opens out onto the front lawn. And imagine yourself sitting there in the early morning watching the sun pour its golden light into the living room. Those are ways to really engage with them and create a story behind the homes, especially when they are teetering and you know it's the right house for them, but they're just kind of set or they haven't made the decision yet. That's a way that you can really help bring them over the edge. Musical background preferences. So this is kind of like a hidden tool. So as I mentioned, they can be distracted by background noises, but when you have a low music that is a comforting spa-like sound playing as they're touring the home, or when you are doing a presentation and let's say it's auditory again and it's visual, so you're doing it virtually, you have some light music that's comforting and soothing in the background. They're not necessarily going to pick up on it, but they will hear it and it will create a sense of comfort for them. Next is auditory feedback. So regularly updating clients using verbal communication is going to be important. You're going to know you're dealing with an auditory person if they just want to jump onto the phone with you rather than get a text from you or rather than receive an email from you, because they just want to hear from you. And that's a way that when you recognize that you've got an auditory person, cater to it. Even if it's outside of your regular communication style, Your job as a real estate agent who is looking to expand your business and be highly successful is to be able to cater to the preferences of your clients to a degree. I'm not saying bend over backwards and go to a silly degree, but I am saying if they're auditory, pick up the phone and call them. It goes so much further. And it also helps them understand as well, because auditory people, when you send them instructions through email or through text, they tend to struggle and not understand. And so they'll get either agitated or disheartened in the process, and you'll start to get some pushback from them. So call them, talk to them, communicate with them. Like I said, whether through phone calls or personalized voice messages as well. Sound quality. So you want to pay attention to the sound quality during property tours and presentations. So let's say that at the property, they have a surround sound system throughout their home, but that surround sound system is crackling. The auditory person is going to pick up on it right away. I'm not saying hide it, but I am saying that if there is an issue with the surround sound system, don't turn it on. Make them know that there's an issue with it, but don't turn it on, because that's then going to turn them off from the house entirely. Okay. So I thought I'd just quickly recap some of the items that we had gone over last week, and then we're going to be diving into the into the kinesthetic system. So we started off reviewing visual representational systems and how to really recognize their characteristics. Brief overview. They're people who use a lot of visual language. So they're going to be describing things from a seeing point. I'm drawn to properties with a picturesque view type of language. We also see that they pay a lot of attention to detail. So these are the people that are going to notice when the baseboards have chew marks from dogs. They're going to notice if there is a chip in the floor that otherwise blends in because it's been repaired. They'll notice these type of things because visual things really stand out to them. They also love imagery. So they're people who kind of imagine a lot, daydream a lot as well. So when you're describing something to them, you'll often notice that they'll look up in their eyes and they'll kind of be as if they're daydreaming because they're picturing it. I can teach you guys about which way they look and what it means, but really quick, if they're looking up to their right, that is when they are recreating. So they've seen it before and they're trying to recreate it. If they're looking up to their left, they're completely imagining it as if they've never seen it before. And that also helps you understand when you're in a negotiation if somebody might be leading you astray and lying to you. But I can teach you guys about that another day. Other parts that they're really interested in is organized space. So people who are very visual people, they're going to like organization. So they're going to be interested in what type of organizational space the home has. What are the closets like? I myself, if you go into my closet, I'm a little type A. You will literally see my clothing is color coordinated, and even the length, like in my dress closet, my clothing is even lined up according to length. So that's a visual trait. They also prefer visual aids. So when you're presenting to them, showing things like floor plans, showing them graphs, those are going to be things that will resonate with them because they'll remember it visually. Also, visual people, terrible with names. I'm also terrible with names, unfortunately, because it takes having to see it. If everyone would just walk around with name tags on them, I could remember names, but it has to be a visual thing. Also very good with spatial awareness, very creative and design appreciation. So these are people who will notice architectural details. So for example, arched entryways, very nice countertops, mosaic tiles, that kind of stuff resonate with. The other part that they're interested in art and visual media. So when it comes to your social media, many of the people that are going to be responding back are likely visual people. But this is why it's really important when you are doing your social media that you're incorporating visual, auditory, and kinesthetic aspects into it to hit the entire VACOG. And then last one, visual memory. Now I'm skipping these ones over because you guys are going to get a copy of the presentation, but for use of time, I want to dive in next into the auditory side. So these people like verbal communication. They're attuned with sound. So these are the type of people that are highly distractible when they're in a loud setting because there's so much going on. They hear a lot. They also have narrative thinking. So when I was talking before, I was mentioning how I always think of like Morgan Freeman when I'm working with a visual, or sorry, an auditory person, because they do have very narrative thinking. I apologize for my cat here. He's elderly and he's snuck out of his room, but he's meowing. So I apologize if he continues to do that. Kind of apropos that he comes in on an auditory side. Going back to narrative thinking, the next one is they have a preference for verbal instruction. So these are the type of people where instead of showing them directions on a map, they want you to just tell them the steps to get somewhere because that's how they remember it. They also have a lot of engagement with audio media. So these are people who not just listen to music, but the quality of the music that they listen to is important. So, for example, if there's a scratchy speaker, they're going to be really bothered by that. Also, clarity and articulate speech. So, if you have ever had somebody who is constantly asking you to speak up or repeat yourself, it's highly likely that they are an auditory person because they're struggling to be able to pay attention to what you're saying if it isn't clearly spoken. So, sometimes just slowing down a little bit can help with that. Also, emphasis on sound quality, like I mentioned, interest in language and linguistics. So these are also people who might find it interesting to learn secondary and third languages just for fun. And then auditory memory. So these are the people where they're really good with names because when you mention them, they're able to remember it easily. Now, let's dive into our kinesthetic side. So kinesthetic people are a little fewer and further between because especially with today's day and age, because they tend to be people who are very physically sensitive. And if you think of the way that we now interact, you don't often connect physically with people. You're doing a lot of meetings probably virtually still, for time's sake, even. Never mind the pandemic that we had. Most people have transitioned into wanting to do virtual meetings because of time's sake. There's still a number of ones that do like to meet in person, but we do find that there's less and less physical connection that we're having with people. Now, this is where you can actually use that to set yourself apart, and I'll talk about that in a moment. These people are hands-on learners. So they are people that are actually tactile. So for example, when you're doing a presentation, actually handing them some type of material and letting them hold it will help resonate with them more. And they'll be more likely to actually remember the information that you've presented to them. Also, body language awareness. These people are in tune with body language. These are the people that come in and automatically, if you are not matching their body language, they think that something's wrong. They might be people who will ask you and catch you off guard, how are you feeling? And you might not realize that you're presenting any signs or symptoms, but maybe that day you're not feeling the greatest. You've dolled yourself up, you look great, but you're just not feeling that great. These people are likely to be able to connect and understand that. These people also are the type of people that when you meet them for the first time, you feel like you know them because you've connected on that physical level. So I gave you guys a tip when I presented to you in person to create rapport with somebody. The first step that you should always do is get into their breathing pattern. That is highly successful with kinesthetic people because it puts them at ease as well. Next, so they prefer touch and feel. So these are the type of people that when you want to make them feel comfortable, doing things like touching their elbow and their forearm, it's a very comforting thing for them. It's also a power stance for you, but it's something that will bring them comfort and peace because it's a familiar sense and it's the way that they connect. There are also people who tend to invade personal space. So like huggers. Now I am a hugger. Most people I hug when I meet them, even if it's the first time. I do have to mind myself, though. I'm always trying to be mindful if it's comfortable for someone or not. But those tend to be kinesthetic people as well. So you'll notice that. Or somebody who stands with their hand on your shoulder, or somebody who is hitting you as they're talking. Those tend to be kinesthetic people. They also have good spatial awareness too, because they are always physically using their body, hands-on problem solving. So when there is an issue that is being presented to them and you have to create a solution, you want to do that in person because that will help them feel there's a sense of control in the situation. And it also helps them connect physically. So when I say hands-on problem solving, let's say that the house that they were looking at that they really wanted to put in an offer, when the inspection came through, there was a leak. Well, what you would do instead of giving them that news necessarily over the phone, you're going to ask to meet with them for a coffee, go to their home or something like that. And you're going to bring solutions for addressing that leak and the cost that it would take to address that leak. And then you're going to be physically giving them that information. That's how you would handle a kinesthetic person, because again, it's that physical response. You're seeing them in person and you're handing them the information that they will then remember better. They use expressive gestures. So these are people that tend to use their hands quite a lot. They also need physical engagement. And then lastly, they prefer comfortable spaces. So these are the type of people that are going to be more concerned about if their big, fluffy, comfortable couch is going to fit into the space, the living room, other than, what does the picture look like on the wall? So now getting into words to listen for. So things like sensation, warm, cool, chill, eerie, soothing, comfort, embrace, release, connection, grasp, smooth, nudge, solid, fluid, navigate, pressure, move, and a number of other ones that you'll read through. These are all words that describe feelings that we have, whether they're physical or emotional feelings. So you're going to want to pay attention to how somebody is describing things that they like or things that they dislike. Next, phrases that you might recognize them using. I'm looking for a home that I can physically connect with, where every room provides a tactile experience. So these are going to be like the people who may or may not like when there's that the old, I can't remember what it's exactly called, when they used to use ceramics on the wall and to create the whole depth perception of it. Those are people that will notice that right away and they may or may not like it. So like textured walls, they'll be either drawn to or repelled by. I want to feel the solid construction of the house, a place where I can truly embrace the comfort. So that's another really interesting one. When somebody is describing the way that a house feels, then that means that they are highly kinesthetic. So for example, I live in a bungalow, 1970s bungalow. When we bought the house, we found that it had many, many issues. And what had happened was the person who had owned it before had cut the support beam in 3 different places. And I remember when I would walk upstairs in my hallway, the hallway had a squishy kind of feel to the ground. That's a very kinesthetic response. Me recognizing that, and you could barely notice it, but I recognized that and I felt that. So that was a kinesthetic response. And you know what it feels like when you walk into a house that just feels sturdy. These are people, kinesthetic people are going to recognize that. So if there is issues with the home, you'll want to address it with the kinesthetic people as they are physically feeling it as well. Um, Walking through the space, I need to sense the fluidity in follow of the layout or in flow of the layout. It has to be effortless. So these are again people that oftentimes like to have open concept spaces because they feel like they can flow seamlessly in and out of each of those spaces. Can you find a property that allows me to physically navigate the surroundings, offering a grounded feeling? So, physical people, kinesthetic people, tend to also preference natural settings. So, houses that may be a little bit older with very mature trees because it gives that nature-esque feeling, they're probably going to be more drawn to homes like that. I'm seeking a home that provides a cozy atmosphere where I can truly experience a sense of stability and comfort. So these are other things as well to remember is that when somebody is buying a home, the way that it makes them feel is a deal maker or breaker, especially with a kinesthetic person. So when you have a home that checks off all of the boxes for them, but they're not resonating in that comfortable standpoint, tailoring your language to help them imagine the space as comfortable and cozy will help them get there. Even describing it, even if the space is not necessarily comfortable and cozy, future pacing it for, and I imagine the house when you incorporate your own cozy furniture here and you put some comfortable pillows and you paint the room the colors that you like, that's going to create an atmosphere that is welcoming and an atmosphere that makes you feel at peace. So, how to recognize a kinesthetic person. So these are individuals with primary kinesthetic representational systems that are often attuned with the physical sensations and experiences. Oftentimes, there are professions that go very hand in hand with kinesthetic. Many times, it will be people who are in the health field. It will be people who are, working as yoga instructors, people who do meditation, who teach meditation and guided meditation. There's a lot of the holistic side that comes out in kinesthetic people. So you do find that they tend to have different types of careers that they are attracted towards. So when you're working with somebody who is in that health space, the first clue to you that they're a kinesthetic person is their profession. So being attuned with that and thinking about it. They also prefer learning through the hands-on activities and experiences. So giving them the information, like I mentioned, physically handing it to them and letting them explore that information will help them remember and it will resonate on a deeper level. They're keen observers of body language, and because they communicate that well, they're going to be really in tune with emotions. So I had mentioned before, being sick and unwell, how they would recognize that, but they're also really in tune with emotions. So that's why it's very important when you are meeting with a kinesthetic person, if something has happened prior to it, that you try to clean your slate as much as possible to go into the meeting fresh. Otherwise, they pick up on it. Now, depending on if they've ever done any type of work in representational systems, they may or may not recognize why they're picking up on it. There's a lot of kinesthetic people that are just, they just function as kinesthetic people. They don't even know what that means, but they're really sensitive to others. So if they're highly sensitive, then that can create a feeling of discomfort with you if you're not on the same level with them. So being really in tune with that and how sensitive they can be. Also, with it being on that sensitive level and the emotionality of it all, these are the type of people that when something doesn't go according to plan, they might cry. Or when something does go according to plan, and let's say that they're successful in their bid on the house, they cry as well. There are people who show their emotions effortlessly, but they also might be people that would appear to be wallflowers, people that might be embarrassed by the way that they show their emotions because they're sensitive. And unfortunately, society oftentimes puts that down a little bit. So being attuned, if you notice that somebody tends to be a little bit shyer, that's also a pretty strong cue that they might be kinesthetic because they're in their fields. They have the preferred for movement and physical activities. So they might be people that like to run every day, that exercise every day. They might be people that, if we're in the art space, they're physically using their body for art. So it could be dancers. It could be people who paint with their body, their hands, that kind of thing. Kinesthetic people also often possess a strong sense of spatial awareness, as I mentioned. So they intuitively understand their physical presence in their surroundings. So they're going to recognize if a space seems claustrophobic, even more so than the average individual. And this is why oftentimes kinesthetic people do like open floor plans and fluid movement because they like to feel comfortable in the space. Now, there are some kinesthetic people who also liked closed-in spaces as well because it brings that sense of comfort to them. So they like a cozy, warm nook, a reading area, something along those lines. You'll watch out for that. That's kind of like a secondary sign if somebody's kinesthetic. But like I said, most kinesthetic people like their open spaces. They excel in hands-on problem solving. So, like I said, preferring practical solutions that involve physical interaction. So these might even be the people that when there is the home inspection going on, they want to follow around. I always encourage that they should follow around during a home inspection, but when they're doing that, they might physically be touching the things that the home inspector's pointing out. They might also be trying to figure out how to fix the problem in advance. Communication for kinesthetic individuals includes expressive gestures and movements that complement their verbal expressions. So you've probably noticed as I'm teaching, I'm using my hands a lot. So I do, when I'm talking about each of the representational systems, I fluidly move into them as I'm presenting it, because that also shows you how they are communicating. So a lot of times you're going to notice that a kinesthetic person is using their hands. They may feel the need to physically engage with objects and environments to fully comprehend and connect with them. And also, kinesthetic individuals often appreciate and seek out comfortable and physically inviting spaces. So these are the people that when you go to a gathering, for example, they're the first person to the couch. They're the first person to the cozy spot. They might even be the person that's pulling the blanket on to them while they're at the party. These are the people who are preferencing and prioritizing their physical and emotional feelings while they're there. Now, with kinesthetic people, how do you want to connect with them on a deeper level? You want to encourage that physical interaction with the property during the viewings. And you can do this by demonstrating it yourself. So, for example, I imagine if I was going to tour someone through a kitchen that is a kinesthetic person, as I walk past the counter, I might feel the countertop, and as I'm describing the countertop, I'd be describing the physical characteristics. So for example, my quartz countertop, as I'm going across it, I physically show them that I'm touching it and say, this white quartz countertop is really durable. It's really great for long time use. As you can see, it's a really nice, smooth, shiny finish, which makes it nice because then the cleaning side of it, it kind of does help hide a little bit of the fingerprints. I'd be describing it as I'm physically touching it. If I was showing a room that had a carpet, for example, I would use my foot to rub the carpet. Again, physical connection with it and encouraging them to also do it. I would say something along the lines of, as you can tell, this carpet is a little bit dated. It's not as fluffy as a brand new carpet might be. So it might be something that you'd want to consider to make the space more cozy is upgrading the padding underneath the carpet or replacing it completely. So these are ways that, again, you can help them physically connect with the space, because then automatically they're going to step on the carpet and they're going to be casting their attention to the carpet and noticing the padding is a little bit thin or the pile of the carpet is not fluffy. And because they're kinesthetic, they preference the comfortable. So that's something that will stick out. Also, emphasizing comfort and feel. So, discussing the tactical aspects of the property. So, maybe when you're reviewing them, and emphasizing comfort and the overall sensory experience. So, you're going to use the language that evokes the sense of touch and physical well being in the home. So, let's say that the home is completely like it needs to be redone for it to fit in with the kinesthetic side for them. Because let's say that it's a dated home, it needs some updoing. So what I would say is, as you're walking through, imagine painting these walls serene colors so that you feel like you're in a spa. And imagine a new throw rug over here that's really fluffy and soft so that when you step out of your bed first thing in the morning, you feel that connection with it and its comfort right away. And then imagine having this house a couple degrees warmer so you get that cozy feeling, and painting the picture for them from that kinesthetic side. Understanding and respecting their personal comfort zones. So this is where you're going to tailor property recommendations based on their preference for cozy, inviting spaces. So for example, if you have a client that is highly kinesthetic, it's probably not going to resonate with them if you're trying to get them to buy a home in the downtown Toronto core with all the hustle and bustle around them, because that's going to counteract against their cozy quietness. So you're going to want to think about, if you've got a kinesthetic person, being closer to a park because the park has that serene setting. Maybe even looking for the older area of the neighborhood. Now, I'm not saying older as in outdated, but like mature trees, mature foliage around them. That will help create a sense of comfort with them when you're looking for the home. Also, exploring outdoor spaces on that note. When you have a kinesthetic person, even if it is the winter time when you're helping them view a home, bring them into the backyard. Encourage them to experience the whole property because they do tend to connect with nature. So having them physically feel the entire property will help them. I know it's cold, going outside is not always the nicest part of being an agent as well for the clients. They probably don't want to go out into the cold all the time, but when it's a kinesthetic person, bring them outside by guiding them outside, being ready with your gear at the back door so that you guys can tour the space, because it helps them again physically connect with the home. Hands-on home customization. So if applicable, involve them in discussions about the potential home customization and improvement projects. So this is when you're touring, and like I said, depending on what their budget is, you're suggesting to them how they can make the bathroom a spa-like serene setting, how they can make their bedroom a place that they can retire into and feel completely closed off from the world, safe and comfortable, how to make their basement inviting and cozy and bright. These are things that you can do to help connect with the kinesthetic people. Now, when you are working with representational systems, and everyone, I will answer questions at the end just so you know, but when you're working with representational systems, there's a number of different ways that as a real estate agent, you can incorporate them to set you apart and to really resonate, to build your success. So here are just a couple of ones. Tailoring your presentations to resonate deeper. So when you first meet someone, you probably don't know if they're going to be kinesthetic, auditory, or if they're going to be visual. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that your presentation, whether it be your listing presentation or your selling or your buyer presentation, you want to make sure that it hits all of the representational systems in one way or another. So making sure that the visuals are inviting, making sure that when you are able to speak about each of the slides that you're being clear and concise, and making sure that it does touch upon kinesthetic responses. So focusing on the feeling aspect of it. By tailoring your presentation, it helps you resonate with them and it helps you build rapport with them because they're going to feel that sense of comfort. Now, remember, people like to work with those who they know, like, and trust. So using their representational system and reflecting it back to them creates that knowingness. It makes them feel comfortable because they feel like they know you. They'll then like you because you're just like them, and then they trust you because you've already built the know and the like factors. Enhanced listing descriptions and captivating property showcases. So whether you are doing a written description of it or you are doing a visual, a video of it, using language that is descriptive, that is kinesthetic, that is visual, that is auditory, will make your description stick out so much more. We often see, I recently saw a listing. It was a luxury listing. The price point was $4.6 million. And literally in the listing, it it listed off a couple of the features, upgrade it, marble, a couple of things. And then it literally said too many features to mention. And I thought to myself, God, you are like you're robbing this opportunity to use the space that you have to describe. I know there's not a ton of space, but even if you were to just describe the essence of the house, the feeling that that house would create, that is far more than too many features to describe. Because then that makes me think that the agent was lazy in their description. So using your space, using visual, auditory, and kinesthetic language helps you transport the person into the actual home, even just by reading the description and looking at the pictures. Now, with the actual home tour, so when you're doing the video tour of the home, if you don't do that, I know the budget must allow for it, but that is such an important aspect because it lights up the entire Bangkok, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. I don't find a lot of people do voiceovers in them, but I would definitely encourage you to consider the next one that you do, including a voiceover that is describing the journey through the home. Something that I know from everything that I do, so from my financial business to coaching with agents, is that people remember how you make them feel. And how you make them feel with a house is going to be the difference between whether one, they work with you, and two, if they buy or not that house. So when you're doing that video, consider doing a voiceover or having somebody who has a nice voice if you're not comfortable with the way your voice sounds. Doing a voiceover, describing the space as it's touring through. Because oftentimes, when you do the visual representation, the person who's auditory and watching it, they're not getting the auditory feedback, so it doesn't resonate with them. So that's a really good cue. Another little trick that I also wanted to mention, which is something that I've been thinking about too, when it comes to doing home tours. Something that people are missing from kinesthetic connection, I apologize about the cat. Something you're missing from the kinesthetic connection is how to make the person really feel at home in the property. There are a few agents that do demonstrate themselves, showcasing the property, sitting on a couch, sitting at the table, showing themselves living in the home. I would absolutely encourage you, if you're not doing that, to do that. Because what it does is it helps people connect on the kinesthetic level, seeing somebody else actually demonstrating, being there, and physically living in the space. I would even go as far as to invite, if it's a family home and you're looking to sell it to the family market, even invite a couple of kids if you're comfortable having them in the video and showcasing family living in it. That's something that I think could really set people apart because you don't see any agents doing that right now. Of course, it has to be the right type of home setting. If you're doing a luxury listing, usually luxury people don't want to see other people living in the house. But for home market, they want to see, it being used as a home and how others move in it. Holistic communication. So by tailoring your approach, you will ensure the seamless connections with clients and varying sensory preferences. So when you go into a setting with a client and you are learning, you're using all of the things I've just taught you to identify if they're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. When you start adapting it from that holistic standpoint, putting yourself into their shoes and feeling it as if you are also kinesthetic, visual, or auditory, that helps create a more seamless approach, a more comfortable approach. When I am working, and I have been doing this for many years. I was licensed first in 2013, so we're 10 years that I've been in the NLP space. When I am with somebody, the first thing that I try to do is go in an empathetic response so that I can feel what they're feeling, because that also helps me identify what representational system that they're in. So I go from a very holistic approach, and then I adapt and I adopt based on that. You can also use it to create a unique brand identity. So, by enhancing your communication, you'll also develop a brand identity as an agent who deeply understands and resonates with their clients. So, I'm sure that you guys have all run into the agents that are very topical, very fake. People know when they're working with somebody who's really fake. So when you're focusing on connecting on that holistic level, that then helps create the connection with people. And it puts you in a different category as a brand. You start to be seen as somebody who creates deeper relationships. And then you create raving fans that way. Something that I have always prioritized is creating friendship bonds with all of my clients, whether it be financial clients or coaching clients, is to have that comfort, that friendship feeling, because then you have a longer lasting relationship. And last, elevating your market presence. So, by honing your communication skills, you will elevate your market presence and stand out as an agent who goes above and beyond. And it's one thing to say that you're an agent that goes above and beyond, because I mean, really, all agents should have a high level of customer service and go above and beyond. But it's the connection with somebody that really makes them feel like you go above and beyond. So sometimes it's letting that auditory person speak their mind, helping that kinesthetic person connect with the property by guiding them and describing them, and then helping the visual person envision life on that property. So, with that, that's everything that I wanted to present to you today. But most importantly, what I wanted to do is flip this back and create an opportunity for us to have questions and for me to answer any of them. So I'm going to open up the chat. Okay, so I just see someone's on the road. Okay, and then someone had to go to the dentist. But in the meantime, who has questions about visual, auditory, or kinesthetic? I know that we're tight on time, but what I want to do is make myself available to anybody who has questions. This is my information here. You can follow up with me by either calling me, texting me, WhatsApping me, or emailing me. And you can also follow me on social media if you aren't already. And I'm happy to dive deeper into any questions that you have with it.